from 1789 to 2020, total 45 persons. 1. George Washington, presidential term 8 years. 2. John Adams, presidential term 4 years. 3. Thomas Jefferson, presidential term 8 years. 4. James Madison, presidential term 8 years. 5. James Monroe, presidential term 8 years. 6. James Quincy Adams, presidential term 4 years. 7. Andrew Jackson, presidential term 8 years. 8. Martin Van Buren, presidential term 4 years. 9. William Henry Harrison, presidential term 1 month. 10. John Tyler, presidential term 4 years. 11. James K. Polk, presidential term 4 years. 12. Zachary Taylor, presidential term 1 year. 13. Millard Fillmore, presidential term 3 years. 14. Franklin Pierce, presidential term 4 years. 15. James Buchanan, presidential term 4 years. 16. Abraham Lincoln, presidential term 4 years. 17. Andrew Johnson, presidential term 4 years. 18. Ulysses S. Grant, presidential term 8 years. 19. Rutherford B. Hayes, presidential term 4 years. 20. James A. Garfield, presidential term 6 months. 21. Chester A. Arthur, presidential term 4 years. 22. Grover Cleveland, presidential term 4 years. 23. Benjamin Harrison, presidential term 4 years. 24. Grover Cleveland, presidential second term 4 years. 25. William McKinley, presidential term 4 years. 26. Theodore Roosevelt, presidential term 8 years. 27. William Howard Taft, presidential term 4 years. 28. Woodrow Wilson, presidential term 8 years. 29. Warren G. Harding, presidential term 2 years. 30. Calvin Coolidge, presidential term 6 years. 31. Herbert Hoover, presidential term 4 years. 32. Franklin D. Roosevelt, presidential long-term 12 years. 33. Harry S. Truman, presidential term 8 years. 34. Dwight D. Eisenhower, presidential term 8 years. 35. John F. Kennedy, presidential term 2 years. 36. Lyndon B. Johnson, presidential term 6 years. 37. Richard Nixon, presidential term 5 years. 38. Gerald Ford, presidential term 3 years. 39. Jimmy Carter, presidential term 4 years. 40. Ronald Reagan, presidential term 8 years. 41. George H. W. Bush, presidential term 4 years. 42. Bill Clinton, presidential term 8 years. 43. George W. Bush, presidential term 8 years. 4. Barack Obama, presidential term 8 years. 45. Donald Trump, presidential term 4 years, present. 2020 November election, presidential term 4 years. I hope you like this documentary. See you next time.